Hi, I'm Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. And today we want to talk to you about ABLE accounts, more specifically, a high level look at what is an ABLE account, who can open one, and what's the benefit of having one. I'm not going to go too deep into the law here because there's a lot of legislation that's gone on, but just know that ABLEs came into effect in 2014. The actual full name of the law itself is the Stephen Beck Jr. Achieving Better Life Experience, ABLE Act, that was passed in 2014. The first ABLE accounts really didn't come into play until 2016. And thanks to more legislation being passed in 2017, it gets us to where we are today in 2021, which is you've got about 41 states plus the District of Columbia that have ABLE accounts available. I'll talk in a little bit about how they get the tax code and tax law that's involved with it. But just know there's about 33,000 accounts that have been opened so far to date, with about $150 million invested. And the idea behind this was legislation that said, we understand that the benefits that these individuals get, that they need help having additional funds available to them and made in such a way that would be easy to access and get a hold of. And that's really the story behind ABLE, right? So I told you, again, I don't like to go deep into it, but the tax code it's a 529, just like a college savings plan. So from that standpoint, this is a municipal security that is handled individually by state. So every state has, if one of the 41 or the District of Columbia has a ABLE account, just like they do a 529 savings plan. The one that gets everybody there is the age 26. That is not the age of the individual who owns the account. That's the age at which the diagnosis or the disability had to occur, had to be prior to age 26. So if you have an individual who's 50 who wants to open an ABLE account and they did not get diagnosed, they were diagnosed when they were 20 or had the disability occur when they were 20, then they can open the account. I will take a quick little side note here just to let you know that currently there is legislation right now that is being reviewed. I believe it's going to committee shortly that is going to move that age from the date of the disability or diagnosis from 26 to 46. Hopefully that will get to committee and then we'll get through and possibly get enacted into legislation. More than likely that'll be in 2022 and 2021, but all positive and going in the right direction with that. So key features are fairly easy as opposed to if you've ever dealt with or tried to look at setting up a trust arrangement. These are all online, so fairly quick, fairly easy to do. You do not have to live in the state that you are opening the account. It varies, every state is different because they're all done by different providers. If you ever want to know, you can reach out to us. Our contact info is at the end. We do have a little bit of an overview that just sort of lines up a couple of different providers and different states. Again, you don't have to live in the state to open an account. The designated beneficiary is the owner. So unlike a traditional college savings plan where you as the parent or the grandparent might be the owner and the child is the beneficiary, in this case, the child, the individual, is not only the owner, but also the beneficiary, right? In opening it up, one of the things that does happen and comes with that is that the understanding that some of those individuals may not be able to open their own account, in which case you would need to have someone to act as either power of attorney, legal guardian, or conservator to help them open the account, act on their behalf in terms of getting that opened. Just like any other 529, the funds that go in, they grow tax-free, so there's never a tax on the growth. And if a distribution comes out and it's used for, and we'll talk about this in a second, QDEs, those are qualified disability expenses, then there's never a tax. There's never a consequence to the individual. Some states may allow you to have an individual estate tax deduction. That's just something you're gonna have to look at state by state and area by area. But certainly if you were living in one state and opened it for another state, you wouldn't get that tax deduction, just like a traditional 529 college savings plan, right? And speaking of those, you can roll funds from a traditional 529 college savings plan into the ABLE account. So this is a conversation if you parent and you've opened a college savings plan for the child, and then the child down the road decides they don't want to attend or go forward with any higher education, post-secondary schooling, you can move the funds from the 529 traditional college savings plan to an ABLE account, 529A, and there's no penalties, there's no taxes, right? So anybody can contribute to it. By that, we mean grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, relatives, anybody can contribute. However, that money is not counted as income. It's only money that is being contributed by the individual would count as income for means testing purposes to the individual. You are not allowed to have more than $100,000 inside an account. Once you go over the $100,000, you will trigger for SSDI a stoppage or suspension of benefits. Right? So key features. So one of the things, the maximum that can be funded in per year is $15,000. And that means from all the other sources, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, relatives, whoever, the maximum that can go in for the individual total is $15,000. Now, if the individual is got income or has resources that are coming into them, they can contribute an additional amount of money. You can see on the screen right now, it's $12,140. That changes on a yearly basis. The $15,000, so you know, is also changed, but it's based on the gift tax exclusion. So every year you can gift somebody. That's generally what that is based on, but it's only for one individual instead of having it for, say, two parents to be able to do it, right? The qualified disability expenses. Qualified disability expenses, that means the money's coming out, it's being used for housing, transportation, food, medical, assisted technology. And there's a broad range of qualified disability expenses that do not trigger income taxes or any problems with the accounts. And as far as the state by state thing, they pretty much all fall under the same rules with ABLE. That means the funds that are in there are not means tested for Medicaid, SSDI, or any of those programs because they are not looked at. The only time they would be looked at is when a distribution comes out, or if you contributed more than the $15,000 in a given year. But if you take the funds out and they fall under the QDE rule, then there are no expenses. There's no means testing. They don't count against any of the program. So why choose an ABLE account, right? Well, so the third party, like I said, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, anybody, relatives, friends, it doesn't matter. Any of those contributions don't count. They don't count as income. They're not counting against any of the means tested programs, right? Any distributions that are used for QDEs do not count against the individual. The individual is the beneficiary, same individual person, right? There's no interest, so there's no income. There's never anything that needs to be reported, right? You can take money. If you do have a special needs trust, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, why that might make sense, to have a special needs trust, you can transfer those into the ABLE account, and that doesn't count as income either, right? So anything that's less than the $15,000 can be put into, on an annual basis, into the ABLE account, and you won't touch any of the means testing or stoppage or problem with the benefits. Okay, so as far as SSI is concerned, you can see that on the screen that says the first $100,000 is disregarded. That means $100,000 in the account and it's fine. However, if you go over that, right, there will be a suspension from that happening. So it's one of those that has to be looked at. If money's flowing in and then there's not distributions coming out, it's a conversation that needs to occur that at some point we've got to have funds coming out, right? We've got to make sure we don't go over that limit. And this is something that's important. We'll talk about it in a second with considerations. When you have a legal guardian, a conservator, or somebody power of attorney down the line who's going to be responsible for this, that they know those are the rules and what are in place. We mentioned a little bit about the QDE, right? So this just talks about the whole thing, whereas this one is specifically on housing, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more in a second, but generally anything to do with housing, food, medical, like I said, assisted technologies, transportation, all of that falls under QDE, so it won't count against the means testing for the individual. They will remain qualified for their benefits. Oh, I missed the click on that. All right, so one of the big drawbacks or one of the problems or, that we hear from this is that there is a payback provision. If you have ever looked at or done any research on special needs trusts, there are two different kinds. You've got a third party and a first party trust. And in the situation of a first party trust, there is a Medicaid payback provision. The same rules apply here on the ABLE account. And all that says is that at the end of it, if the individual has passed away and there is still money in the account, then Medicaid can step in and take a look and say, wait, we paid X amount of benefits. We want to have our payback to that before any other funds are distributed out to the estate or other individuals. So it's one of those, it does kind of set up a little blockade for some folks, a little block, in terms of moving forward with an account. But the idea here is an ABLE is really meant as a spending account. When it's set up, I'll talk about the ease and that part of it, but you've got the ability to withdraw the funds, use them for daily living expenses, like I said, housing, food, transportation. So you don't want to actually have huge amounts building up inside here, so that because the individual should be using them to be living on a regular basis. That's part of what the ABLE is about. But just know that it's there, that if there is funds inside there, they probably are not going to go anywhere other than back to Medicaid to pay for it. All right, so the advantage and disadvantages, and this is sort of what I was talking about there. So one, very easy to set up. You don't really need a lot of money to fund into it. Other than a power of attorney for somebody to help the individual, if you're not a legal guardian already, set up an account, there's really no need for an attorney, right? Anybody can contribute to this, as I said, and they don't count for any of the federally funded means, programs. They're not counted as means testing. Everything is on the beneficiary, though. The beneficiary owns the account. They own the money. They can spend it however they want, right? So, the debit card checking, that's every program is a little different, but they've got access to it. So it shows there's one there, it says distributions to pay for housing costs are not income for SSI program. This is one of the things with a special needs trust. A special needs trust, if it goes to pay for some of the housing, the subsidy, the allotments, it can trigger that with SSI. That does not happen with ABLE. So what you can do is you can, as we talked about earlier, move funds from inside the special needs trust, transfer them to ABLE, let ABLE pay for the housing, and then you won't trip that. You won't have that problem. The money's like we talked about, they go tax-free. If distributed out, as long as they're used for QDEs, they won't count. There'll be no tax and there'll be no means testing. And 529s are permitted. You can roll over from a traditional college savings plan into ABLE. The disadvantages, right? It's online. So sometimes that's a little trip up for some folks in terms of it, because you really don't walk into some place and say, hey, I want to open an ABLE account, right? The individual again, the individual is the owner and the beneficiary, but can only have one count. It's not like, hey, grandma's going to open one, grandpa's going to open one, and so on. The individual is the only person who's opening the account. They are the owner and the beneficiary. As we said, that disability had to have occurred, the diagnosis, before age 26. However, legislation currently moving through the process right now, which will hopefully push that to age 46 sometime over the next year or so. The 15,000, that's the gift tax limit, but that's the limit that is available that can go in from every resource from third parties for the individual. Pretty much only going to be able to fund it with cash. There's really not too much other than, hey, another 529 to roll over into it. It's not like a special needs trust where you can put other types of resources, other assets into it. It's really, hey, you've got cash, you're funding into it, right? And then the biggest one on there is that there is that payback provision that goes along with it. So things to be considering when looking at ABLE account. how much money is involved, right? That's one of the things you got to be planning out. How much on an annual basis is the individual going to be needing over and above the government benefits that they need to be supplementing for it, right? Whose money is it going to be? Whether should it be in a trust or should it be in an ABLE account because the individual has access to it, right? Are there any other assets? Maybe those need to be put into a special needs trust and only have the cash available in an ABLE account, right? The cost to establish it, like I said, there's very little cost in terms of going through it. Once you have Medicaid or SSI or SSDI, you're not going to be means tested. You're not going to have to worry about that. That Medicaid payback provision, that is a consideration, something you really need to be looking at. Is there another sibling or somebody else that we really had wanted the funds to go to? We talked about the thing about the housing, right? So again, should funds be used from that special needs trust to offset housing expenses, you can trigger a problem with SSI, whereas the ABLE account won't do that, right? So, you just want to make sure that you have the idea and whether or not it makes sense. A lot of times we'll say, it's probably the best idea to have both a special needs trust and an ABLE account so that you can do a little bit of both, put away assets in one, have cash and ready expenses in the other. I certainly hope you got something out of this today. It was a real quick just run through and go through about ABLE accounts. One of the things we do want to make available to anybody is we have a free guide. It's the Roadmap to Government Benefits for Special Needs Financial Planning. We make that available to anybody. For watching the video today, we're certainly happy to give you one. You can just reach out to us, send us an email. It's info@aresfoundation.org. And just tell us, hey, saw the video, can you send me or just send me a copy of the roadmap? And we're happy to get you out. It talks about Medicaid and SSDI and SSI and housing and a couple other things. We're happy to send that out to you. But if you ever do have any questions, ask us. We can help with that. You can go to our website, learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do. It's www.aresfoundation.org. The mission for the Ares Foundation is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money.